Welcome to another edition of Living with Purpose. Today, I have Elizabeth Stokely, who is the Executive Director for Global Washington, a organization that focuses on promoting global development in Washington State. Elizabeth has been in the development sector for over 20 plus years. She has worked with numerous organizations, including Axion, a microfinance agency, doing work in Latin America. She is a fluent Spanish speaker, lots of experience in Latin America. So please join me in welcoming Elizabeth.
Thanks so much, Akhtar. So good to see you today.
So tell us your journey. You've got this interesting journey, which many people in this country actually go through with growing up and then getting into the development sector. So talk a little bit about your background, your family. How did you get into this space?
Thanks so much, Akhtar. I'm such a fan of this podcast, and it's humbling to listen to all the conversations that you've had with such amazing people. So I'm honored to be part of that group. I had the chance to reflect a bit when you invited me. I was the first person in my family to get involved in international affairs and international development. So I'm often asked that question. Why were you drawn to this? Why were you drawn to Latin America and other languages? And it feels in many ways like, non-linear path, but everything has been leading toward this moment with Global Washington, a fabulous organization I've been lucky to lead for the last 9 months. And it's really about bridging worlds. And at Global Washington, we talk about bringing Washington to the world and the world to Washington. And I think that my family history, in a different way, contributed to this idea of bridging worlds. My paternal grandmother, Wilma Dykeman Stokely, she was a regional activist in a time when women did not have that role outside of the family, and especially not in the rural South. She was from the mountains of North Carolina, in Asheville, North Carolina, and was really self-taught and became a writer and launched her own career, became a well-known regional writer, received awards at the state level from North Carolina and Tennessee back in the 50s. And, had these different aspects to her life and her career, and really interesting person. And it's been interesting, she passed 20 years ago almost, but I've been able to get closer to her through her writing. And we were actually promoting activities around social justice in North Carolina in her legacy. So really about the power of the written and the spoken word and environmental and social justice. I was not raised there. My parents are from there. And then we moved when I was at a young age up to the Northeast to Boston area. So very much I was of different worlds within the United States, rural, urban, South, North. And I think that I certainly carry that with me. It's always given me an empathy for people who are outsiders and who bridge different worlds. I've always had that curiosity and that interest and that passion for people in other cultures.
So talk a little bit about your growing up, right? You grew up in Massachusetts, outside of Boston. Talk a little bit about that. What was your family doing, and how did that then lead you to go and pursue what you pursued and went into the Peace Corps, went into the development? So just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Like I said, I was raised in Boston. I think the best part of a childhood in New England is the value of education and curiosity. I think people, that's really fundamental. So I was just always drawn to learning more about other cultures and histories and ways of seeing the world. I wasn't even really traveling the world at that point, but I read volumes and wanted to study abroad for a year. I just knew that was kind of always my goal for university. So decided to make the unusual leap outside of New England for college and went to a small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania, Dickinson College, that was known at that time, especially for study abroad. 60% of the college student body studied abroad, and there were very well established programs, and not in capital cities, in areas of countries where you would really be immersed and live with a family. And that's how I learned Spanish. I lived with a Spanish-speaking family for a year, studied in Spanish at university in Malaga in Spain, and did a double major in international studies in Spanish. So that root that I have with my parents and my grandmother, very much kind of interdisciplinary thinking. I always was attracted to that and seeing how the pieces fit together and how I could make an impact in the world. So I was very fortunate to then, right after college, get a Fulbright to go to Colombia, South America. I had actually really wanted to be in Latin America at that time. My university didn't have a year-long program in South America or Latin America for study abroad. So I knew after college that I wanted to spend time in the global South, and went to Colombia and just fell in love with Colombian people. I mean, there were these incredible challenges, and really saw many of the challenges that you see even in rural areas in the United States as well, but just incredible challenges in history there, and just some of the best people I've met in my life. So that set the stage for it.
When did you go to Colombia, and where? And who as a Fulbright Scholar?
Sure, yeah, that was 2008. So I went to Cali, Colombia, as a Fulbrighter, and was placed at a university in Cali, which is the third largest city in Colombia, but it actually happens to be adjacent to the regions in Colombia that have been most historically impacted by violence. So it was an unbelievable experience.
Part was still there, right? I mean, peace had not been at that time.
No, yeah.
We did not have peace between the FARC and the government. So the guerrillas were still...
There were kidnappings and bombings while I was there. It was really one of my key life decisions, because I found out that I got the Fulbright, I want to say April, maybe March or April, before graduating college. And I got the phone call and, immediately told my parents. And my mother, she'll be angry that I'm saying that, immediately burst into tears and said, "You can't go. You can't go." And it was a really fraught decision, because I knew my family, my surrounding friends, no one could understand why I wanted to go to Colombia. And it was all, you had just gotten the news of, additional people that had been kidnapped. So, I mean, I really did stick out, but it really launched and set the stage for the rest of my career.
I went around the same time, and just before I went to Bogota, I also went to Cali, and I was at Microsoft at that time. And there was a bombing in one of the Bogota clubs, not a nightclub, but one of these, very fancy clubs, the golf course and all of that. And 100 plus people were killed. And people were just saying, "What is wrong with you? Why are you going to Colombia?" And I landed up in Cali. I actually went into the jungle for a project that we were doing to build peace through technology with the FARC and the non-FARC. So I was under armed security, so I completely understand the environment that you were living in at that time, because it was fantastic. And what were you working on? What specifically were you working on at that time?
this was actually the first year that they were reopening Fulbright in Colombia since the establishment of the program. So it was like just on the cusp, as you're saying, of opening really to outsiders. And that the need that they saw, that the government saw, and what they wanted was support for English training. So I was actually training the next generation of English teachers and professors at the university there. But in my work, Kali has a very rich history, Afro-Colombian descent, and culture, and that was very prominent in the university where I was placed. So I actually established a program for Afro-Colombian honors students and alumni of the university to take English, because actually Fulbright was trying to reach, for example, the students of disadvantaged backgrounds, but no one was eligible because they didn't have the minimum requirements for English. So I was, I did quite a bit of work with that community, and it was one of the most meaningful experiences of my life.
So you spent a year in Colombia, and then you came back, and then talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the world had kind of fallen apart in the meantime. I remember getting a phone call from my family, with the crash of 2008.
Economic crash.
And they said, "Are you watching the news?" And here I am. I'm like living in a place with unreliable internet. There wasn't FaceTime. There were, people didn't have smartphones, and so you're kind of like off on your own. And I said, whoa, I guess I need to look at the news, and it was just obviously massive. And many of my friends who had graduated then or were about to graduate, had their jobs canceled in New York and were out of work. And I was extremely fortunate to find a job in Washington, D.C. in what I was passionate about, which was education and social policy. Really trying to advance a career in global development and apply the learnings that I had from that year in Colombia. I went to a think tank called Inter-American Dialogue in DC and was managing the activities and convenings of the education program, which actually, similar to Global Washington, included a network of member organizations and supporters throughout the region, throughout the Western Hemisphere. So that was all USAID funded, and it was my foray into work in policy and global development in Washington.
How did that shape your thinking? And talk a little bit about how you've gone into becoming an expert in this space of fundraising, microfinance, community development. So just share a little bit about that.
I think that the trend here is really that the being on the front lines and having the firsthand experience were kind of the most transformative experiences in my career. And I felt that after having this year in Colombia. I was back in Washington, working on reports to USAID, attending, organizing and attending policy meetings. But, still early 20s, and was just really yearning for more experience in the field. Felt, I really want to expand my own skill set and what I can do on the ground in social impact. Everyone around me had done the Peace Corps, and I'd always admired the program. And at that point, you couldn't choose where you served. So I applied. I said, well, I'll just see where it goes, and was accepted. And so again, to the surprise of everyone around me, I ended up quitting my job to go to the Peace Corps in Ecuador. And the Peace Corps, it's 27 months. So I was in rural Ecuador, a city in southern Ecuador, Loja, where actually the majority of Ecuadorians have never been. It's like quite remote, 16 hours by bus from Quito through the mountains. The first and foremost, again, the hope was training English teachers. That was what the government was requesting of Peace Corps. They wanted capacity building for English. But you become so much more than a designation, a designated role in the Peace Corps. So I was teaching. I was co-teaching curriculum design, training teachers to take the TOEFL exam, which was new policy from the national government that teachers needed to take the TOEFL, which is a whole other story. But, then got pulled into, I lived with my host mother. She was a single mother of 4 children, but was the lifeblood of her poor neighborhood, was a small tienda out of her house, had a window on the street corner that she would sell bread starting at 5 a.m. every morning to the neighbors. And I ended up becoming very close with her and helping her with the business. And I realized the truly interconnected nature of social and human development of, yes, people need education, but they also really, really need livelihood. They need access to capital. They need the ability to provide for themselves and their family in order to improve education and health levels. And so that was when I really dove more into the economic aspect and gender equality and experiencing firsthand the very strong machismo of Ecuadorian culture as well. So was so passionate, but knew that I still needed more technical skills. And I wanted to think about scaling development in a way that isn't always possible through direct foreign aid. And that's what led me to business and ultimately my MBA and working at Axion for 7 years.
And you were on the East Coast, right?
But mostly on the East Coast.
Mostly on the East Coast. So you then moved to Seattle.
Yes.
And that because your husband actually is working at Microsoft. Am I correct?
No, not Microsoft. Another tech company. Anyway, this isn't about him.
So what brought you here?
Yes, we've supported each other's careers, as you know, through for a couple. We've moved around. We actually were in California, then moved back to Boston. For me, it was back to Boston for 5 years, and Axion closed their Boston office permanently during the pandemic, and we decided to make the leap when he had an offer out here and have established ourselves and our son in Redmond, and we've been here 4 years. And I guess I skipped over Axion, but the partnerships aspect really came to the fore. I mean, I wanted to leverage my own personal strengths in a way that I could contribute to social impact and at the intersection of different sectors, really understanding how all these pieces fit together to support one another and create innovation for social good. And I found my niche. I kind of fell into it in partnerships at Axion. I held a couple of different hats before leading our institutional and strategic partnerships and did that for 7 years. So I knew moving out to Seattle that I wanted to continue that work, but locally rooted way.
So here you are, and now you are at Global Washington, which it's a unique organization, and you're really trying to rethink what Global Washington should do given the environment that we are in. So talk a little bit about Global Washington and your vision and where you think the development sector should focus its energies on.
That's a tough one. I mean, now in these times more than ever, I mean, anyone who's familiar with or working in this space, which I think many of your listeners are, know that it's a tough landscape right now. All of my conversations every day, the majority of them relate to program funding cuts and staff cuts and just the challenges in the macro ecosystem. But I think where we have unique value as Global Washington is this connection to the local community. And it's in our name, Washington, Washington State. And Washington State has always been a leader. You know, we're part of the Pacific Northwest ethos of connectedness to nature, to community. We're the gateway to the Pacific from the United States, continental United States. So I think we're seeing how important local community is in global context. And that's where we are going to be leaning in even more going forward. People need support now. You know, we want to support our network of 120 member organizations to continue to thrive and support our state innovation economy and international globalized economy and ecosystem. And we will continue to do so. So I'm so passionate about this work and how global connects to local.
So that's a great way to kind of segue into a little bit around the whole conversation around living with purpose. Talk a little bit about, why you believe purpose is important and how you show up with purpose in the work that you do.
I think it really goes back to kind of where I started, which is I'm a people person. I'm a bridge builder. And as long as I can remember, I've cared about people and had that curiosity, but also that empathy for personal experience. And I think that's where I really have learned to lean in my own purpose and career is building those connections. And I think understanding that interconnectedness of people within a community, of sectors, of communities across the world. And I see my purpose as, really being a connector of people, opportunities, and ideas. And so how are we connecting ourselves and myself to the folks that really that are fellow travelers in this, change-making journey, and are, committed to the similar values of interconnectedness.
So as we come to the end of our conversation, give us your one golden nugget, a piece of wisdom that you live by and you'd like to share with our listeners.
I think it's look for the common ground, because what I've seen in my career is that it's human nature to identify difference and be, thinking about differences. If there's one thing that I've learned in living and working in dozens of countries, it's that we are more connected than we think. And perhaps now more than ever, given technology. And I think it's stay curious and look for the common ground.
Stay curious, look for the common ground. I think it is so important that we continuously look for new things to focus on. Being part of the common ground actually does not allow us to forget our past. So in some ways, thinking about curiosity, which is rooted in the common ground, allows us to ensure that whatever we do extends the common good.
That's right.
One grows personally because we are curious. But if we are focused on the common ground, we are not just curious for ourselves, we are actually curious for the betterment of the world. Elizabeth, thank you so very much for such a wonderful conversation. Again, remember, purpose is that renewable source of energy that continues to drive humanity forward. Ignite your purpose, be curious, stay grounded, focus on the common good. Elizabeth, thank you very much for being part of this conversation.
Thank you so much, Akhtar. It was a true pleasure.